everybody, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford, and when I'm not co-hosting this podcast with my lovely partner Peter, I am probably writing about training, nutrition, and racing, or hopefully I'm outside doing one of those things.
And I am Peter, the lovely partner, kinesiologist, and endurance coach. And you are here on the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we talk about and talk to, I don't know if I can make that into a cohesive sentence, but to people who move really well, or in a variety of ways, and the people who sort of specialize or coach or study those movements. And what we hope to do is sort of pull out different routines or inspire new movements that we can incorporate into our consummate athlete lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had a lot of really cool guests on. We have a lot of great ones kind of coming your way in the next few weeks. I think the Rebecca Rusch one that we had on a couple weeks ago might be one of our top ones that we've ever had.
I think so, yeah.
I've heard so many people talking about it. She just gave so much valuable wisdom from, both a straight up training for gravel and like what tires to choose practical standpoint to the much more like sports psychology related, self-talk and motivation and, knowing your why and knowing your core values. So that episode, I've gone back and listened to it. It's made me do a ton of thinking. And
I'm definitely thinking about my new sport now that I'm 35 and what I can be world class at.
This might be the one thing I am a little ticked at Rebecca for, but it's not her fault. That's just Peter's midlife crisis acting up.
Yeah, I don't know what my sport is, but something. Long distance meandering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What have you been up to this week, Peter?
Well, I raced a road race. Racing's probably a little bold or a little, what does that be? Generous. It's a little generous, but there was a local race here, a fondo even. So I went into that. Got a little outgunned on my cyclocross bike, but it was a really good workout and got me out longer than, a couple hours. Once it gets over 3, I find it really hard now. So got in a bit of volume, which is really good for what's sort of upcoming as far as races and training. Yeah. How about you?
Well, the same day you had the fondo, I had the Fast and Female event over at Hardwood Ski and Bike.
Right. Lots of, how many did you have? 60 young ladies. Yeah, excited about moving in a variety of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Fast and Female Champ Chats are super fun. It's a lot of local pro racers from all different sports. So the Fast and Female ambassadors included, pro cross-country mountain bikers and skiers and volleyball players and track racers, just tons of really cool women. And then the girls, there were 60 girls from 8 to 14 years old. So it was a really packed day. I was there with all Shred Girl stuff. I got to talk a little bit about the book. I met a few readers who read the book in the first day it came out and were pretty excited about it. I had a lot of good discussions about sport and also what superpower I would want. I went with flying, and then we discussed how that would work really well for bike riding because you would never have to worry about crashing or not nailing a jump or something because you could just, whoosh your way out of it.
I suppose unless you crashed while flying.
That's not part of the superpower.
Right.
Yeah.
You yogaed and you had to set up a scavenger hunt or an obstacle course or something?
I actually didn't end up having to do the obstacle course, but a lot of, the obstacle course was one of the highlights of the day for a lot of the girls. I ran a yoga session and that was super fun. So yeah, really great inspirational day. Something I wish had been around when I was a kid, but if you have kids and you're in Canada, and they do some in North America, it's starting to pick up, definitely check out Fast and Female for, what they're up to. And of course, Shred Girls still out. Actually, it would be super helpful if you have the book, if you've read it, or if your kid has read it, head over to Amazon and leave a rating or review. That would be amazing and helps get it in front of girls who aren't really sporty. That was actually the cool part about the Fast and Female event. One of the girls I met who'd read it, not a cyclist at all, but begged her parents for a bike after reading it. So that's kind of what it's all about for me. So that was really exciting.
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise just running a bunch, a lot more trails now that it's finally dried up and it's summer again. So that's been fun. And I will say, shout out, Peter got me some Tracksmith running gear for my birthday, and I'm obsessed with it. It's like the comfiest stuff I've ever worn. So highly recommend if anyone's looking for some new running kit. My dad
stylish and comfortable.
My dad started perusing the website after I opened my presents and he saw. So if Dave Herford's wearing it, you know it's so. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, time for another Q&A episode.
Yes. Thank you to everyone for their questions. Some good ones.
Yeah. So this first one is kind of one that's near and dear to my heart, I think.
Do you want me to read it to you?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'll read it. This person is asking about hand tingling and numbness issues on the cyclocross bike, but not on the touring bike. So this one's near and dear to my heart because it is very much related to a lot of or it could be very much related to a lot of the same things I talk about in my book, Saddle Sore, that's all about riding comfortable and riding happy. There's a big section on bike fit. And in that, there's kind of the first important reminder that even though two bikes might be similarly sized, a 48 centimeter frame for your cross bike and for your touring bike, in my case, the geometries could be, quite different. And, the way you would set up the bike could be very different, especially, if you're racing cyclocross. That's very different than if you're out for a really lengthy touring day. So I think, to me, this question is kind of all about bike fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing that comes to mind is like most touring bikes are going to have handlebars above the level of the seat. So it's going to take a lot of pressure off the hands. Or just going to be more upright for sure. The other thing to watch would be like the cyclocross bike, maybe the nose of the saddle's tipped down. So if you're like sliding forward onto your hands a bit more too. And then conversely, the other way you could come at this is, I guess, or the way you could solve that sort of difference is maybe your cyclocross bike's set up a bit too much like a road bike. A lot of times you might have the bars actually higher, so maybe level with the saddle or just a bit before. There'll be a lot of variation, but again, we don't want your hands going numb either. Cyclocross bikes are weird, right? Because they're not really overly comfortable, and they're designed for short-term riding. So if you're doing a lot of volume training, like I do on my cyclocross bike, I ride it almost, like my road and gravel bike too. So it's just being cognizant that like maybe your race setup might need to be changed, or it's not quite the same as your like base season. Everyone's in cyclocross base now. It might not be the exact same, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also like similar to, what we often are saying about standing up on the bike to get a little bit of blood flow back into your nether regions. I think the same applies for hands. Like it's totally okay to move your hands a little bit. It's pretty expected.
Well, you got 3 spots to put them on a cyclocross bike too.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of people get stuck, and that's in my cyclocross course, which will be sort of launching and stuff with on the Ryan Leach website for cyclocross dismounts. A big part of that is learning the 3 positions and getting used to the 3 hand positions, right? So you sort of have your mountain bike-ish tops position, the hoods, and then the drops. And a lot of times in cyclocross, everyone just like grabs the hoods and never lets go. But you definitely want to use all of them.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, make sure you're switching between those, give your hand a little shake every once in a while.
And I guess that would be one more thing that would be an argument to raise the bars, because you could use the drops.
Yeah,
to get lower, right? So sometimes you like bump up whatever, 10 centimeters or whatever, half an inch. But then you could actually use the drops and be half an inch or more below your normal, right? So you were saying shake out hands? Yeah,
shake out your hands. And I mean, another thing that might kind of just indicate you're having like a bit of a fit issue is I always look at the bend of my wrist. I mean, you don't want your hand to be straight. I mean, if you could see me, I'm straightening out my hand. Yeah. But you also don't want it to be like 90 degrees super bent. And that definitely tends to happen on cyclocross bikes. I think it's very easy to have your hand tilted back, or like
if you're holding the tops.
If you're holding the tops, or if you're... I actually have had it with hoods, because cyclocross brakes can also be a little funky. Just something to think about, like look at how your hands are positioned on the bike, like what angle they're at, because if you have them, super bent, you're restricting your blood flow a
bit. Hood position might relate there too. Like some people, have that nice flat platform on the top. And so if your brakes, which can move independent of your handlebar, which isn't always obvious because of the bar tape, they might be too low or too high. So then you might have this like almost like a valley, right? Like a big dip before the rubber for your hood starts. So that might be a thing. And then the bar tape would be another one. Maybe your bar tape's really thin or not as padded as maybe you need.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, those are a couple of good suggestions. Definitely let us know what ends up happening with that.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious now. All right. Next one. Food for when it's hot on the bike that won't melt, that you can travel with, that aren't gels and chews.
This is like I don't know what, some sort of skill testing question. It's like Nancy is Carol's sister, but Carol, lives in Washington, but her sister doesn't live.
And the train is coming at 35 miles an hour.
In opposite directions.
What
color is their cat?
Oh, God. Anyway, and this also leads into the next question of just how to change your food and drink as temperatures rise during the summer. So for me during the summer, the couple foods that came to mind are actually like of the Newton variety that aren't gels and chews. Definitely, I go for like the Fig Newtons, because with the more flour-based round crust.
Sure.
I find that they don't really end up getting melty. Even when the fig gets a little bit soft, it's still kind of within the crumble part, so it doesn't get super gross. The more like racy version of that, and obviously a little bit tastier in my opinion, would be the Cliff Bar nut butter filled ones.
Right.
Again, just because they have more of a shell to them, and then they're actually amazing in the heat, because when the like hazelnut chocolate inside gets a little soft because it's hot, they taste super good, but it never gets really melty. That's what I did for Iron Man. And despite the fact that it was 90 degrees out and they were in my back pocket, they didn't really get excessively gross or anything. They travel really well too. So those are definitely my personal favorites.
So let's review the confines here.
Food for when it's hot on the bike that won't melt, that isn't a gel or a chew.
So we're not necessarily racing though.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think any of the bars, or most bars, right?
See, I don't know.
Not chocolate covered bars, but like you could have a Cliff Bar or a Picky Bar would be great. I really like Picky Bars. Laura bars would be okay. Bananas would be a common thing that people eat.
Yeah, bananas can get a little gross in the heat. But...
And then also has to travel well, though.
Yeah, so bananas sort of fall.
You could get a banana cover. One of those plastic banana covers. Yeah. What else do we do? Just you could make rice bars. You could make oat granola bars. You could make... What else do people make? We've made macaroons before. I've seen people do like pancakes and then just sort of bring pancakes with them.
Yeah, and as long as it's not like a super lengthy ride, you're not really going to run into much of like a danger zone in terms of like food safety, unless you have like a ham sandwich. But I wouldn't really recommend a ham sandwich in heat like anyway.
Peanut butter and jam and stuff.
Yeah, so I think
but no gels or chews.
No gels or chews. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say I did a story on this a couple of years ago, and what the general expert conclusion was while the viscosity of the gels and the chews might change when it gets hot, gels get a little runnier, chews can kind of melt together. It's not dangerous at all. Like you're not in any kind of like trouble with it,
right? As
a rule, so.
Yeah, I've never had problems in like mountain bike races or anything.
Don't stress on if they got hot in the car or anything. If they've been sitting out for like days,
you gotta watch.
Definitely check your expiration dates.
You don't want to leave stuff in the cars or whatever, but if it's boiling maybe. But if it's boiling, you're probably good.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So this also leads into the how to change your food and drink as temperatures rise. And this to me is something I've been coming up with this week actually, as it's finally gotten hot out. And I was out on my long run, and in the spring I'm all about the Goo has these Stroop waffles, and I was really into them for a while. During the winter I was very into Snickers bars on the bike. They do not travel well when it gets hot. Pro tip. Skip the Snickers bar. But anyway, I'm out last week and it's finally warm out, and I realized I was so not hungry for a waffle. So the heat will change your appetite a fair bit. for, some people, most people, I'm going to argue. So, for me instead, now I'm switching back to using more Tailwind, and I'm actually going to ice my pack for my long run on Wednesday. So I'll throw a few ice cubes in with my water and Tailwind. And for me, that's going to be a lot easier. So just remember, what tasted great during the spring might be a little bit tough to handle as it gets hotter out.
Mm-hmm. You'll see two things. Like, I prefer to separate my water and my food/gel. So in a, intense 90-minute mountain bike race, I'll have gels and then I'll have water. And I really like the water separated because then I can douse myself. But when it's hotter, I'll drink way more. But if it's not super hot or the race is super hectic, and it's only a 90-minute race, right? So like hydration is not absolutely critical for, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a 200-mile race. So if I don't drink a ton, I can still eat as much as I need to and sort of hydrate sort of separately, right? There's sort of that variation in how much you're drinking. So that would be an argument once it gets hot. And you also people find that it gets like pasty if you have like really thick mix in your bottles. So a lot of people will separate once it gets hotter. So again, so you have that straight water to sort of rinse your mouth. Mm-hmm. So if you have 2 bottles or 2 sources of water, like a pack and a bottle, then you maybe have one that's like a light mix. Because sometimes that lemon and a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt, like something like a Scratch or an Osmo, or some of those lighter carbohydrate mixes can be really nice. Like that lemon will actually maybe help you drink. So some people find that really helpful. But if it's really, really thickly mixed, like if you're a Gatorade person,
you
may find that gets a little overwhelming, especially if it's all you have is mix. There's a lot of people end up in races with only mix and they're like, bagging water off of people on the side of the road or something.
Yeah.
Right?
I will say like Tailwind I found is really light and nice for how high calorie it is. So I really enjoy that. But definitely, Gatorade would disgust me.
I like your frozen idea. I've definitely done that. Like you could freeze even your food, right? I don't know if you freeze a Snickers bar and how long that would last, but you could definitely try that.
That one is like a chip tooth waiting to happen, unfortunately. But
I think if you waited a couple hours, you'd be okay.
So we do have an episode coming up soon with Dr. Stacy Sims where we talk more about heat stuff. But really, the couple main tips from her are, actually the dousing yourself and just trying to cool down your skin, not with ice. Like her one big thing is like, don't put ice directly on your skin because that actually makes your blood vessels constrict. So it actually makes things worse in a lot of ways. It's also just kind of bad for your skin, to be honest. And so, staying as like doused as possible and drinking cooler water. And, this might be the time where if you haven't been putting any electrolytes in your bottles, it's probably time to start because the more you're sweating, the more electrolyte loss. So
the cold drinks are definitely big too. Get the like fuel inside.
Yeah. The
coldness inside your body too.
Yeah.
Jeff talked about that in his sort of gravel stage racing strategies.
I've actually found the couple hot races I've done, it's weird, but actually holding the liquid in your mouth for a couple extra seconds sounds kind of gross, and it's hard to do if you're like panting and having a really hard time. But if you're in more of a distance kind of race, like a gravel grinder or in my case, an ultra run, where you're not breathing super heavily the whole time, I found like just holding cold water in my mouth for an extra couple seconds really made me feel a lot cooler.
I don't know. I'm thinking about this. I don't think that my bar sandwich strategy really changes a lot as it gets hotter.
I don't think it's that it changes for everyone.
Like certainly like in an endurance ride type situation, and my races, it sort of more depends on the race.
Yeah, I don't think it's an everyone thing. I'm just saying, like, don't be surprised if something that you really liked back in March is suddenly not super appealing.
I guess the melting would be like, I wouldn't do like if a bar was chocolate covered or like you say a Snickers, like you maybe buy your Snickers at the corner store or something instead of carrying it with.
Something about like really heavy carbs in the summer just does not appeal to me. Like the more like bready waffle type things, but you don't really ever do that kind of thing. No. So you just wouldn't really have that same like differentiation, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know if we have much more. Careful with your chocolate covered unless you're into really gooey chocolate, and then it's actually not so bad.
That's just a mess.
I mean, it wasn't that warm, but I had a Snickers bar at the road race on the weekend.
Love a good Snickers. Wait, did you take one of my Snickers bars? We might have to talk.
It was a little too liquefied, and that was at around 15 to 17 Canadian. And what is that in American? 60, 65?
Yeah, it wasn't that hot on Saturday, but like it doesn't take much to get a Snickers bar to start melting pretty good.
Well, I guess it gets against the body too. Anyhow, that's enough.
Okay. Next question, also about fueling. Fueling for training at night. So we're talking about those people who are training after dinner, possibly even a couple hours after dinner, after the kids are put down. You know, you're hopping on the trainer, you're going to like the late night yoga class.
Yeah, I thought this was a good one. This one came from a phone consult I did just actually today. You can book a phone consult if you'd like. It's at smartathlete.ca.
Smoothly done there, dear.
Thank you. And yeah, so this client trains at night, sort of after the kids go to bed and family's already had dinner, right? So they have dinner sort of 5:36, say, and then he's training maybe 8, 9 even. And this is not rare, right? I try and encourage not every night doing this, but for some people that's life, right? And that's how you get through sort of different phases of the year. Or, you know, sort of add that extra day maybe. And we're just very careful about sleep and stuff. But there is this sort of question of like, what do you do with that post-workout window when you're like wanting to get to bed right after, right? You don't want to have like this large pizza dinner or something. Mm-hmm. So what I usually suggest is ask is, well, what are you doing? You've been doing it. Like, how are you sleeping and how are you feeling? How are you recovering? Because that's usually a good basis, right? Like most people sort of have what tastes, what's appealing at that time of day. And then like, did you lay awake all night in bed or not? I think that's a good way without like overcomplicating it, right? Like, but sort of where it seems to trend towards is, you know, you get a little bit of carbohydrate, a little bit of fat, a little bit of protein. So that could be like a smoothie. Some people sort of pre-blend the smoothie so they don't wake their family. And then that's what they do, just sort of light, not too much. And that works. Some people, it's like, you know, some yogurt and cereal or something, or like milk and some fruit or something like that, right? Whatever sort of is appealing to you and is convenient, and just not too much, because we don't want it to like be digesting while you're sleeping a ton, right?
Yeah, and I think the other thing, especially as we get into summer, again, is going to be getting that cooler food in. So it's probably not the night to have soup after your workout. Probably want to think more like smoothie. Yeah. Maybe you throw a couple ice cubes in your smoothie this time, or like, you know, make your smoothie, sure, but then throw it in the freezer during your workout.
For sort of a slushy / smoothie type setup, just to get that cooling strategy done, and then maybe a colder shower, making sure the room's cool, because that's definitely, you know, there's two sides.
That's what keeps you up, right?
Because there is the, like, you've had dinner, right, and you're gonna have breakfast. So for most, you know, people who are working and they're not pro athletes who are going to be up training again at 6 a.m. probably, right? We do have time to recover. That recovery window is not overly important, especially when there's nutrients that have come in from a bunch of meals already, right? We don't want to get into the situation where we're stacking a bunch of extra calories.
Yeah, I think what we should also clarify, when we say smoothie, you're really only thinking like a couple hundred calories. You're not thinking, it's not a lot. Like,
yeah, like a lot of people are like a whey protein with some blueberries, maybe a banana or something. So it's not super, you know, and that, again, that could be, if you're a whole milk person, do whole milk and, you know, a banana and some blueberries or something. Like, it's not, I don't know what else people put in that make it really high calorie.
You get like the peanut butter, the coconut oil, like, people dump a lot of crazy stuff into smoothies.
And that could be fine, but yeah, that might not be the time for the like super heavy, like 1,000 calories, like can of coconut milk smoothie.
Yeah, we're not thinking like a meal smoothie. This is more like a top up.
Careful with those whole cans of coconut milk.
And think about how you feel when you wake up in the morning too, in addition to like how you're sleeping. Yeah, I would
track it for sure. How you feel on the next workout.
Yeah, like are you waking up and you're starving and like all you can think about is breakfast, or are you waking up like, oh, I could eat, but I'm not like desperate?
Right. Or even waking up at night, I think, would be my bigger concern. Right? Like finding that you're waking at like 1 or 2 in the morning and just like really hungry and like really awake and alert, then that would be sort of you got to change something. And it could go either way, I think, in that case, right? It might be, maybe you have to just have a little bit during the workout, even would be another option we didn't talk about, sort of fueling a bit during the workout and then just nothing after. And maybe that ends up with a better sort of, whether it's insulin sort of blood sugar response, or whether it's just, you know, too much food for you to go to bed on.
Yeah, definitely. All comes back to the, you know, nutrition is super individualized, and, you know, what works for somebody else and what somebody else told you to do that they or told you they do might not be what works for you.
Yeah, it depends so much. The workout, how you sort of are wired up yourself, and then what your other meals have looked like and whatnot. So go forth. Give it a try.
Awesome. All right, next one. I've noticed my CTL score, so that's chronic training load, has gone down a bit in the last few weeks. Just wanted to make sure that's okay and that I'm putting in enough effort and I'm where I should be.
Right. So this athlete is in season. They're racing. So very normal. And we just had the Hunter Allen podcast there a couple back.
So give us like the one sentence, what is chronic training load?
Right. So this is sort of taking the time you're riding and the intensity you're riding and sort of putting them together into one sort of number called training stress score, TSS. And then chronic training load is just sort of a rolling average of sort of what your average day looks like. I try and describe it of like, just sort of your work capacity on a given day. So on average in the last month or 2 months, what does your average day look like? So that takes into all the 0 days when you don't train, your off days. And it takes into account your giant, big, long weekend ride and your races and all this stuff. So Hunter, when he was on, talked a bit about, and I should say that you can think about this if this is just like, oh, wow, extra numbers. Like think about it as just like my hours have gone down this week and I'm racing in we're in race weeks of June and July. There's all the big races coming. So your hours have gone down. Right. And really that's essentially the question here. So what this athlete is then seeing is that as we taper or peak or just get into race season, we're recovering before the race, recovering after the race. Right. So we're not having those big training rides as much. We often miss that big weekend or 2 big weekend rides that a lot of us are used to doing. So the average is going to drop, right? That just makes sense intuitively. If you're going to be recovered for race day, the average has to drop. And then the people that chase the CTL number, that's how you get in trouble for sure, is you're always out doing your zone 2 rides, trying to get more volume in, but you're also then very tired, right? Because the problem with fitness is it's also fatigue.
I mean, I think one of the things here is just like ultimately no number really matters as much as your race result if what you're trying to do is race well.
Exactly. Great point. Yeah. And with this athlete, we went back and I was like, well, how have your races been going? Great. Personal best, up a category. Great. How have your power numbers been looking? And he only has power on the trainer, which is an important thing too. So we'll talk about that. And Hunter talked about this too. But his power numbers on the trainer, he rides a couple times during the week. Great. Some PBs in the last week in the sort of recovery week we're in, with a good race as well. So that's great, right? And that's the trend we want to see. We don't really care how you got there. Ultimately, like you're there now, hopefully we'll care, eventually when we're trying to repeat it. So that's that. And then the power, the other thing that can happen in season, and again, Hunter talks about this in the podcast with him, but if you're not having power from the same device for every workout, then you got to be very careful putting all your faith in this one magical number. If you're pulling it from heart rate or you're pulling it from 2 different devices or indoors and outdoors, it gets tricky, right? So then we have to go back to using our heads and thinking, how are intervals going? How much are we riding time wise?
Yeah. And I think maybe it's also just like every number is not going to go up like all at once. Like,
yep.
There's always going to be some number that's going to tank. And if you're...
Well, tanking, it didn't tank. It leveled.
Okay, not tank.
Let's say leveled.
Sorry, yeah, that's not the right phrase. But just, if your chronic training load is super high, then like how you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of fatigue. Like your fatigue would probably also be up. Like you're just... it's very hard to be kind of where all of your numbers are, we'll say, optimal or peaking.
Well, exactly. Like if your chronic training load is increasing, it means that you're doing like more training than you're used to, right? So acutely, like it would be like if this week you went out and rode twice as much as you usually do in a week, every day was longer, double the length, say you had a vacation week, then you're going to see your chronic training load increase a bunch, but your fatigue, which is called ATL, acute training load, it's going to skyrocket. But then your form is going to plummet because it's a mirror image of that. So if you were going to go and race, so you did double the training you're used to and then raced on Sunday. So you trained every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, double what you're used to, and then just jumped into a race. Would you expect to do well? No. Right? Like, you're not going to produce this like magical peak numbers, right? We'd have to recover. So maybe we could take the next week really easy and train a little less than usual. All those numbers would recover. CTL would sort of plateau, if not decline a bit, but you'd hope to do better in that next week. That would be a really short block in recovery, but you could certainly try something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Next question. During weight sessions, as I progressed, should I keep reps at 10 and increase the weights, or should I focus on doing more reps with the same amount of weight? And we're talking about in season. So, we're in race season and weight training is, 2 times a week and probably not super heavy.
Right.
So yeah, which training stress do you add to there?
Yeah, it depends what you're trying to do, right? A lot of people, or I should say a lot of people, there's sort of, I guess, 3 different strategies. If we're in an actual race season, then I think we want to be careful and just think sort of, it's good we're in the gym and we go through the motions. If it's not a race week, then maybe you try and see a little bit of improvement. So improvement could be weights the same, and instead of doing 12 reps, you go for 13 or 14 or 15 or whatever the rep range is usually, right? Your classic is 3 sets of 10, say, but 10 should mean 8 to 12. So if the weight's new and heavier, you maybe do 8. So you aim for 3 by 8, and then maybe the next week you can push it a bit more reps or add a bit of weight or whatever, right? Like, you just want to increase something.
But you probably don't want to increase both in the same workout.
You wouldn't usually, right? Like, you might, and again, you might do like a set of 12, a set of 10, a set of 8 or something, right? And we're just looking for that form or maybe the speed of the lift to change. And that's sort of how we determine if you're pulling back. But in season, to me, it's just like, if you're in the gym or you're doing a core routine, it's good. And especially if it's a race week, you want to be careful, like pushing, especially the volume. So a lot of times I'll have people, if they're used to doing sort of a 3 by 10, just for ease, maybe we pull back and do like 2 by 8, and they get into the gym, they warm up, they lift sort of the same loads, but we've dropped the volume down. And this is the exact same discussion we just had with bike stuff, right? We've dropped the volume down, but the intensity generally is kept the same or higher even, right? In your classical peak. So in this case, I would say, if you're in there, and this client was sort of like they're pushing the strength, the races are sort of on and off, then the weeks you can, get in there and challenge yourself, go for it, right? So the one thing that they're going to try is they've been doing like hands actually elevated on a stability ball, doing push-ups. And that's like really easy now, which is great progress. So they're going to now try like just either push-ups on the ground or even putting their feet on the ball, which is going to be way harder, but drop the reps down. So maybe 3 by 6 push-ups with feet on the ball, right?
Yeah, I like that. I'll also throw in, we have a few different videos for anywhere core, anywhere strength. A bunch of different routines. So we'll try to link to a couple of those in the show notes if you are kind of thinking about doing strength routine. And actually, maybe let's just back it up. I think we've maybe briefly talked about this, but I mean, strength training in the season, it's still worth doing, right?
It really depends, right? Sometimes you run into a time crunch and you have to sort of assess where our limitations are. It's tough. I like to believe that it's helpful. A lot of us have life that we have to contend with, right? And so I try and make the argument that it's helpful for life, if not for cycling. If anything, it's helping you, you pick up that box or that kid jumps on you, and you're absorbing that hopefully so you can get out on your bike and train more. And that's certainly been my experience. Like, we don't have nearly as much bike crashes as we do have like lifestyle based injuries. So I like to think that strength helps. I don't know that we can 100% assure that, but yeah, I think for most, busy active people, it's worthwhile and certainly fits with consummate athlete lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it only has to be 15 minutes a day, like a couple times a week for maintenance. Like, it's amazing how little you have to do to make it count.
Yeah. And on the Dr. Bubs podcast, we talked a bit too, like, it sort of depends where you're coming from, right? If you've been Olympic weightlifting your whole life, then you're going to have to, to see a benefit or to maintain, it might be a bit more. But if you're someone who's done very little strength training, that everyday core, or, a couple times a week after your run or your bike or your workout, you do 10, 20 minutes of core in the house. Maybe then you get, a dumbbell or two and sort of play with it in the house. It doesn't have to be, you don't need a gym membership right off the bat, certainly. I always say I'd rather get you get hooked on it and see, maybe some body composition changes, or your buddy Bobby is changing.
That's weird.
Yeah. And yeah, so then hopefully you get hooked, right? Again, if you can see that progression, I couldn't do push-ups, now I can do 10 push-ups, then you're hooked on strength training, right? You've seen that progress that it's hard to see in most other sports, that like very obvious, like no push-ups type scenario.
I think the urge to go to the gym definitely exists for people, partially because, it's more of like an official workout if you go to the gym. But to me, like, yeah, doing your core, your body weight stuff at home makes so much more sense because there's no excuse to not do it most of the time.
Yes, I think for a lot of people that's true. I think for the busy people who have kids at home, that's maybe less true. There isn't always that obvious 10 minutes where they have that time. I try and make that, go and play with the kids, because that's going to count as some core. And
telling you can bench press your kids till they're like 6 or 7 years old.
Well, it doesn't even have to be that, but you can go to the playground and just be more, squat down and climb up stuff and hang off stuff. Like, there's a lot of benefit there's to be had from that movement variety.
Goblet squat your 4-year-old. Do it.
But then I think the other thing that I'm seeing and trying to ask more and more about, a lot of people have access to gym over lunch hour at work or near work or through work. And we don't use it. And then it's like, well, would you bet on the athlete who trains exactly the same? We all do our hour workout Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then a couple long workouts on the weekend. Would you bet on the athlete who just does that? Or would you bet on the athlete that also goes to the gym at work 2 times a week? Who would you bet on to win and be like resilient through the season, right? This is a Coach Clance always said that, right? Like, who are you going to bet on, the stronger athlete, or are you going to bet on the like weaker athlete?
I'm going to bet on the stronger athlete, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, and then maybe that doesn't hold true in, like, we were talking like a Tour de France, like, just going up the mountain. But even still, you would wonder in that case, would that athlete be resilient, by working just through some range of motion?
I think my favorite thing is interviewing Swain Tuft and talking to him about this. And he talks about, he's like, yeah, could I have gotten, a couple % faster on the bike? Like, yes, but I would have sacrificed all of my health and resilience to do that. And he said, like, he knows so many world tour guys who couldn't, like, would get winded walking up the stairs to their hotel room because, like, they couldn't do, like, stairs. Right. Stairs were too much. Or, like, couldn't, like, lift their suitcases onto the bed.
Right.
Or, like, would be, like, weak, like, have a hard time with it.
Yeah, or bike bags through airports or whatever. Yeah.
And he's just never been willing to compromise his, like, overall health for the sake of getting a % or 2 faster. So that's why I find interviewing him just so much fun. Yeah,
I think I'll link to Molly's yoga, and I have my Anywhere core thing, and then I have 1 article or 2 articles as well for, like, Matt My Ride, that had sort of a routine that was like for cyclists that hate strength training or something to this effect. It's worth starting with something. You can call it core, yoga, whatever you want to call it. But I do think for most people it's worth, right? We all have those niggles and stuff, right? It could be mobility, right? Like, that's why I include yoga almost in this. Like, it's really what you're going to do. And then just try and make it harder, right? So for you, it might be, if you're a yoga person, you might, again, what is it? Chaturanga. You're going to lower, which is a push-up essentially. You're going to lower into your chaturangas more times or slower. You're going to do chair pose and hold it a little longer. You're going to do, more reps of your sun salutations with warrior 1. That's a lunge, right? Is there other ones that I'm missing that are good, like boat pose for your core, right?
Man, pretty much every yoga pose, if you hold it long enough or deep enough, it's going to be...
Or move a little more steady, right? You're more sun salutation, so you've moved through range, right? Yeah, cool. In-season strength.
We did I always do a slow race when I do the plank into chaturanga when I teach yoga. So we did that this weekend, and man, I got my butt kicked by a couple 8-year-old gymnasts.
Well, there's some power to weight, I think, there.
That is true. Anyway, all right. Last question. With intervals, is it better to have the last one be the best, or better to have it be the worst? That's one that was almost one of the same as the first question. Like, if the train is going at,
maybe. I mean, it's also like very philosophical, I think, right?
Yes. So to explain that one a little bit better for anyone who heard me read that and it's just like, I don't understand what you just said. Basically, just when you're doing an interval set of, say, 5 2-minute intervals, is it better to have the last set of 2 minutes be your strongest or to be the weakest?
Right. And we could say, you know, at a race, is it better to be fast on like the first lap hero and then fade and barely finish?
Oh, I see. That one gets way too tactical, though.
Maybe, but this is sort of the trend. And what you'll often see is you have your sort of fast twitch, for lack of a better term, your people who are just like your sprinters, and they can just crush. Like, they can make themselves, and I do not have this ability, but they can make themselves like basically pass out and fall over at the top of the first hill. If you say go, they will win and they will just die trying, right? And they will fall over in the ditch. Like, I could never make myself do that. But I tend to be the opposite, where like I can pace them pretty evenly and then go a little faster on the last one, right? So I often at a race, I find the start really hard, but I can like usually hold my pace pretty well. And then often I could even like negative split, maybe pull a little bit out at the finish, right? And so it is. In a race, it's a little tactical. Mountain biking, I've had to get a lot better as it's gotten shorter and, you know, a little bit more tactical, that like if you're not there on the start, there's no pacing back, right? You're going to have traffic and you're behind, right?
Right.
So you have to think about the goal a little bit. But I think if you think about which of those bins are you the fast twitch sprinter person, or are you the like zone 2, like endurance person? So whether it's your races or your intervals will tell that story. Right? Do you always sort of level intervals, or are you the person that like fades and often doesn't finish? Then I think that sort of informs which one you should try. Because I think you want to be able to do it, right? If I go out and say, hey, I want you to just go ballistic on the first one and then hold on for dear life, you should be able to do a decent job of that. Again, my own self-preservation and lack of, we'll call it fast twitch, I'm not going to have it near the peak, but I should be able to like push myself if I'm motivated, right? Conversely, the fast twitch person is going to have to really have discipline. You might even have to put a limit on yourself for maybe heart rate or power or whatever you have, to make that first one like too easy, and then see to the finish, right? Let them get to the finish, and even pace that. So I think it's worth just doing the thing you can't do, and then you can play with that.
So basically the answer is like whichever one sounds easier, don't do that
one.
Well,
the one you've done, there's no point in like keep doing that, like hone that. But I think you want to learn that, right? And I think with a lot of intervals, especially harder intervals, there's a good argument to do it fast first and then even have a bit of fade, especially as you get to be more experienced. Like, again, I think it's worth pacing and having level intervals, but I think there is a gain to be had by going out a little hard and having like a tolerable fade and just looking. You might even add a couple repetitions. So this is, again, motivated, maybe getting into that intermediate advanced athlete might have, say it's like a 5x4 classic, like sort of 5x3, 5x4 type hill interval. If you're not fading by the last one, you might actually add a rep or two to actually fade. And then the next time you have your time up the hill or your wattage, you might really challenge yourself.
All I can think about is Kurt Cobain's, like, it's better to burn out than fade away, and how that does not apply in this situation. The opposite. It's better to fade
Kurt
away
Cobain
than
was
burn out.
Very slow twitch person. Is that what you're saying?
I think. I'm not really sure.
I don't know. Did he say that? I think you're misattributing that. But
I am not.
Yeah. I mean, I think both are good. I think it depends on your goal. But I think as you get into that more advanced category, it's good to at least do some workouts that are hard like that and fade. And there's a mental piece to that. We'll link to my latest article about the things we say to ourselves. But I think because it is okay to fade a bit, you'll see lots of races where the winner has faded a bit on that last lap and they're just holding on.
Yeah, like just listen to how many times the announcer is like, oh my gosh, they're gonna catch him, or they've almost caught her.
Yeah, like it's, you gotta have pretty steady, but like what we're trying to find is that more, is there more in the bank there that you're not really drawing on, right? So I think on these harder intervals, when you're doing intervals sort of threshold and above, it is worth trying it and just sort of seeing how it goes and looking for that little bit of fade, right? Like give it an honest effort, but see in your intervals, are you fading sort of maybe by 5%, right? Like a good hard one and then 5%, and figuring out what that like limit is, right? And I think it's for a lot of us, if you keep good numbers, it's just look at your last interval set, add 10 or maybe add 10%, 5% to whatever your first one was, and then see what happens, and fight and just be kind to yourself and keep fighting, right? Because it's okay, even if it's 5 or 10% lower, just keep fighting. It's fine, right? And I think that experience for a lot of us is quite valuable. Because I like it's so often in races I feel like I'm just like not even moving, and then it's really not that bad. It's just that's what it feels like.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, before we wrap up, I think I actually just kind of wanted to throw in this public service announcement, so to speak, and just say something I've been thinking about lately is it's okay to not feel like racing. I think that's where I'm kind of coming down these days. Is like I kind of struggled with this past month, trying to figure out what to sign up for next or what to do, or people were asking like what my next race was going to be, and I didn't really know. And I mean, I have some stuff on the calendar, but I realized like I don't really feel like racing right now, or like racing just for the sake of having a race on the schedule. So just putting it out to anyone who's feeling a little bit of that mid-season, ennui, or just kind of like meh on the idea. Like it's fine to take that mid-season break, and it's fine to, not do a race this weekend. And yeah, if you're in that boat, it's cool. You'll probably come out of it and be totally fine. Let yourself feel those feelings.
Okay.
Sorry.
Was that important for you to get?
This is my TED Talk, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I feel like you've been kind of feeling that lately too.
Yeah, I mean, I have races on the calendar, but like I say, Rebecca Rush.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of clients, definitely. It's, there's always that fitness, right? You can go out and on these intervals and just, that can be your goal for a while, right? And then you can, once you get, see progress and you're just feeling fitter, you can always sort of use that how you want, right?
Cool. All right. We will wrap up there. As always, we would be super grateful if you'd head over to iTunes and rate and review this podcast. That makes our lives, super good, because it helps us boost up in the rankings and get more people listening to this show. And yeah, it's always great to hear from you. So keep the questions coming over at consummateathlete.com, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Molly J. Herford and at Peter Glassford. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.